Welcome to the third season of Heard Afros and Audio interview series. My guest today is Check Edgar. How are you doing today, man?
I am super fired up. I am excited to be here. I waited for this moment and I'm happy I'm having it right now.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I'm so grateful that you found the opportunity and that you signed up and that you're here. So let's jump into it because I started learning a little bit about you once I saw you come through. And I want to know, man, you have a podcast called Why Am I Still Single?
Yes.
What inspired you to create Why Am I Still Single, except for the obvious? And how has your journey in sharing personal dating stories evolved over time from the beginning to where you are now?
All right. For me, I started off as a storyteller. And usually I'm the kind of guy that would watch a movie and I can narrate the movie to you without you actually seeing the movie. I love to tell stories. I love to make people happy. I love to make people laugh. And what had happened was that sometime last year, I think it was in April, I decided it was time for me to reveal to the world, hey, I am single. The reason is because there are so many people that would look at me and say, you're a handsome young man, you have a great voice, you have a great character. I am sure you have a girlfriend, and I'm sure you're married somewhere. And I'm like, no, I am not, surprisingly. So what I decided to do was I started listening to podcasts a long time ago. I think sometime in 2019. I realized that what most people were doing in my country were more interview kind of podcasts where they have a guest and they just talk and have interviews. But I wanted to do something totally different. And I wanted to create episodes where I'm telling stories about my life and I'm painting them with dialogues or monologues or whatever, but more dramatic forms and then storytelling. So that's the idea. The first episode was written in 2020, but then I had my first recording in August last year. The idea was just for me to tell stories about my relationships and my relationship life, and then hopefully one day get married and end the podcast. So the podcast ends the day I get married, actually. That's the idea. So it's basically me saying,
Yeah.
hey, here, I'm single. If you like me, if you think you can work with me, let's try something out. And hopefully someone comes and I get married.
Nice. So I'm curious, how many dates have you had as a result of the podcast?
All right. So just before I mention the dates, I would say I've received over 150 different emails from different women saying, "Oh, I really love you. I think that we can work something out. We have a lot of things in common. We should probably go out on a date." Sometimes my manager would look through these emails and say, "Oh, Edgar, I think you should try this one out." Gone about 15 of them. Had a couple of dates. Restaurants, have gone out to the beach with some of them, gone to play games with some of them, and then you get to listen to them. And I always tell them, is it okay if I tell the story of this date on the podcast as well? They're like, yeah, sure, it's all good. But yeah, it happens. About 15 of them, if I'm being honest. 15 people.
It's cool, man. I can't imagine if you open yourself up and say, this is what I'm looking for, that folks will show up.
Mhm.
But still, there's a sense of, but I'm looking for something specific.
Yeah. So,
So it's
so,
not
so,
just
so I think,
anybody who arrives.
yeah, so I think the idea is I don't know what I want, but I know what I
Mhm.
don't want.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. That's a good way to live. I know what I don't want. And I think that as people grow up, learn more, have more experiences,
Yeah.
we get to consider more of the green flags than the red ones. And when there's a flag on the play, there's a flag on the play. If this doesn't work, why waste the time and the
Absolutely.
energy for either of you?
Absolutely.
Just keep it moving. I appreciate that story, Edgar.
Thank you.
Your podcast has gained a loyal fan base known as the Checkmates. How do you foster such a strong connection with your audience, and what role do they play in shaping your content?
To be honest, when I started creating content in 2018, before I started the podcast, I've always been doing social media content, hilarious stuff, social media experiments. The idea for me with Checkmates is I'm trying to create a community where people can get connected with the artists. Most of the time, when creators make their content or their piece of art, create the community that follows them only get to watch from a distance and see it like a show glass. They only get to see from the outside. But Checkmates, I'm bringing them into my life, whether it's sharing their comments and replying their comments, or I'm going on a date with them. I am creating an opportunity for them to know me way more than some other people. Now, it's interesting because the season of Why Am I Still Single? is going to feature more of my checkmates than celebrity or friends. So what I'm doing is I'm opening up the podcast to interview more of them, to say, come, if you're single, you've been going through this for a while. So why don't you just come and share your story as well? So that's the idea. It's a space where right now I'm telling my story. And in a few years, hopefully, if I'm not married by then, they also get to share their story as well. That's the connection. It's a room for me to share and also a room for my fans and followers to share as well.
I love that, man. When you have this community that gets to be more connected with you, a lot of
Mhm.
times you become someone that's, as you said, through the glass. Like, you don't get a chance to truly connect
Yeah,
and get to experience someone, but getting that opportunity to really connect with people and allowing them to share their stories too. That's so important. And I think it is a great strategy
yeah,
for success when it comes to really connecting with folks and helping them. And it continues to keep you sustainable because they want to be around you. They want to hear more from you because people love to hear about themselves. So I think that's a great strategy. And it's probably less strategy, but more just who you are as a person, just
absolutely.
wanting to get to know people as well.
Absolutely. You're totally right.
Yeah, man, that's cool. So you said that the podcast ends when you get married. How do you balance sharing humorous and heartfelt moments with the overarching goal of finding the one?
I don't think the idea is to balance anything here. There are a couple of episodes where people have listened to it. I think there's a title, I called it 6 Feet Deep. It's an episode where I share a story about a lady I dated and she died during the process of our argument at one point. So it isn't about humor, basically. So
Mm.
it's there to just make you laugh. And there are some stories that would make you really just connect to your emotions and, feel really bad or sad or whatever. For me, the idea is every single day I have an experience with someone from the opposite gender. I am looking at how do I tell this story in a way people would enjoy it. And what happens with that is when I find the one and we start dating, I am obviously going to inform the lady that, hey, I have a podcast where I share all this. I'm going to share your story, all right? And I don't know if she would say, I want this to continue after we're married, but definitely it would probably happen before we're married and all that stuff. But once we're married, it's not left for us to probably change the name of the podcast or
Mm-hmm.
do something else or have another podcast or something. But I made up my mind to say that the last episode of Why Am I Still Single, I already have an idea of how the episode would play out. So the beginning of the episode, you would hear the so I don't know how the weddings are done where you are, but in Nigeria, so when you're getting married, especially what we call the reception wedding, so what happens is you have the MC calls out the family of the bride, the family of the groom. That is where the podcast starts from. So I'm going to record the wedding
Okay.
and then the first thing you hear is, ladies and gentlemen, at this point, please can we welcome the family of the bride? That's the first thing you hear before you hear my voice say, hey
Nice.
guys,
Okay.
we have finally come to the end of the podcast. Today is my wedding day. And blah 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 blah. So that's just the idea
Yeah.
for me. So I'm always intentional with the friends that I keep or the ladies around me because I can always draw a story from whatever happens around. Yeah, for humor, I live and breathe humor. So I always, if you give me an opportunity to tell someone how this interview went or how this interview is going, I can make it hilarious. I can make this interview so funny, one hilarious story to someone else. You get what I'm saying? But for me, it's
Yeah.
just making people laugh. It's more about just telling great stories. Some of them would make you laugh, some
Yeah.
of them
Yeah.
wouldn't make you laugh. So that's just the idea.
Yeah, and the identifier of a great storyteller is that you evoke emotions and sometimes provoke emotions, right? You're being very intentional about how it's crafted and how it's delivered and the experience that someone else is having
Yeah.
and listening to the story. I consider myself a storyteller too, and there's so much magic in a good story, especially for the people who get to engage with it and really get insight into how your mind works, but also the depth of your own personality
Mm,
and the things that you think and believe in your perspectives.
yeah.
It's really a whole art to it. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you.
Your storytelling style blends humor and relatability, as we just spoke about. How do you approach crafting episodes that entertain while remaining authentic to your experiences?
All right. The first thing that I always want to do is because I understand my audience, I understand how people listen to podcasts. Podcast is just growing in Nigeria or in my country. It's not the biggest thing in Africa or in Nigeria. People love to see more than they listen. So what I do is I create a montage. The first thing when you play the podcast for the first 2 3 minutes, there's always some sort of audio drama whereby you are engaged in the first 2 3 minutes. All right. So after you have that, I created a very hilarious theme music. So what happens with the theme music is when you listen to the theme music, you just laugh, and then people get to sing the song. And some people just love the podcast because of the theme music as well. But I understand the
Got
importance
it.
of
Okay.
music and how music can also connect with the soul and the minds of people that are listening as well. So that was intentional. And then after the music, of course, you want to ask questions. You want to ask them how they're doing, what's going on with their lives. I think for me, my questions and my stories are so relatable. So if I'm telling you something, I am sure that they're listening at home, they are nodding their heads like this also happens to me. There is nothing supernatural. There is nothing special. It's the regular day stories. So people they relate with the stories and they understand. Also with the sound effects I use, with the background music I use, with the background sound, and even with the female voices I include in my stories as well, they're able to relate with these things. They understand where I'm coming from because they know that these are things that happen in our day-to-day life. So I think that's just the idea for me, creating stories that they can relate with and using humor from the very beginning, asking questions in between the podcast, and also putting in music and sound bites and sound effects that would connect with them. So yeah, that's the idea for me.
Yeah, man. I love that. It's all about the experience.
Yeah,
And so many of us across the diaspora understand how music, food, stories, and the opportunity to connect
yeah,
makes all the difference in the world. And when you miss some of those elements, and I know you're not handing out food while people are listening, but we can only imagine that people say, I'm going to listen to this on my lunch break, or I'm going to
yeah.
listen to this during dinner. They enter into it creating the full experience themselves.
Mm.
I'm curious now, when you talked about the sound effects and the music, do you do that work? Do you have a team?
All right. So, quick story here. A guy reached out to me one time and he said, "Oh, I really love your podcast. I would love to meet your team." And he thought that I had a couple of 5, 6, 7, 8 people that make my podcast. And it's hilarious because I only have one guy apart from myself, just one guy. So, what happens
Okay.
is I do the writing myself. I also do the scripting. I also do the descriptions for the sound. And when I record, I do the recording myself. I have a studio. This is my studio. You can see Edgar doesn't lie. In my studio. So
Hmm.
this is my studio, and I do my recording. I take out all the noise. I do the first layer of editing, and then I send it to my sound guy. So my sound guy follows the script. We've worked together for a while, so he knows the kind of sound I want. And of course, we always have corrections here and there, but it's just me and him. So he does most of the sound effects. He creates the sound. So if you listen to the podcast, most of the sounds are created by the guy. He is a beautiful producer, sound producer, and engineer. And it's just both of us at the end of the day, except the moments where I'm using the voices from maybe female friends of mine. I could probably just think of an idea and I have a very terrible female voice. If you listen to the first episode, you hear my voice.
Yeah.
I'm like, "Hey, so how are you doing? How's your day going? Are you fine? Are you good?" And then someone sends me a message. Basically, "Oh, I understand that you're trying to make it your thing, but please, if you have like friends, tell them to help you record that part. You don't want to be doing that every time." So except when I have like friends, I just tell them, "Please, I need you to help me reenact this scene or record this for me." And
Hmm.
then they help me do it as well. But it's majorly me, myself, and my sound guy.
Nice, man. And the women that you get involved in this, what I'm thinking about right
Yeah.
now is the fact that you started the podcast, you said in 2020
No, no, I started in August. So I'd written the first episode in
of
20,
this year.
no, last year.
Oh, okay. 2024,
Yeah,
obviously. Yes, my
yeah,
bad.
yeah. So I'd written the first
Yeah.
episode in 2020. But yeah, I
Okay.
didn't do anything till last year. So apparently, I have
Okay.
this terrible syndrome where I want something to be so perfect before I put it out there. So I've been writing, rewriting, adjusting things. And then my manager just told me last day, he said, "Edgar, we've had this podcast for too long. It's time to put it out. Out to
Yeah.
perfection. Just put it out there right now." And so what he
Yeah.
is hearing this right now, but what he said was, "If you don't put it out next week, Friday, that was the Friday I released it, he said, you will pay me money." I was going to pay my manager
Mm.
some amount of money for every Friday I don't put it out. And just because I don't want to give that guy some money, I said, "Okay, I don't care how it would go. I'll just put it out that way." And then every week I kept putting it out that
Yeah.
way. So that was how we started. But the first episode has been rating since sometime in 2020. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that. But the question for me was, you had such a great vision, right? And you are the storyteller. Where were you putting this energy before the podcast came out? What were you doing with the
Oh,
creativity?
I was making videos. If you check my Instagram page, you would see my content. I was making videos on YouTube,
Okay.
all the type of content. So what I've been doing is I've also been writing. I worked with some agencies in Nigeria, Cracks Media, Yaba Left Online, Pulse Nigeria. So a couple of different agencies in my country where I write for them. I write blogs, comedy blogs, articles, and then also my social media. I've been creating hilarious content, videos just to make people laugh. I used to do this phone prank. I would call a lady and ask some questions just to find out if she's really dating whoever she says she's dating, and then I record it and put it on my social media. It was crazy at the time. So that was what I was doing, with my time, with my creativity, just creating social experiments and content online. But I've always had the
Yeah,
idea that if I was ever going to do a podcast, it was going to be about dating and my relationship stories, you know.
got it. Okay. So one of the fan favorite episodes is Love is Blind, which sparked significant engagement among your listeners. What do you think made that story resonate so deeply, and what has been your favorite audience reaction to it?
So I think the reason why most people love their episode is the twist in the story. Most of the stories either been falling out of love because of one major issue or the other. But for that episode, what had happened was the lady I was talking about, her name is Lovett, and she actually had an issue with her eye. So she couldn't really see so well. And so it's called Love is Blind.
Got it.
All right. And she's from a place in Nigeria we call Ibadan or your state. Now, the thing about most ladies in Ibadan or your state, Lord have mercy. The thing about most ladies in Ibadan or your state is some of them have this funny H factor when they speak. All right. So instead of saying house, you hear them say house, house. They pronounce their H in every time they speak. So it was very hilarious because what had happened was in the episode, I went on a date and she came late and we started insulting each other and we went back and forth. And that back and forth, people didn't expect me to insult her the way she insulted me. So it was just very hilarious. Other episodes have been very soft, very sweet, very romantic, but I wasn't romantic on this episode. I went hard and we said so much stuff to each other. So I think that's why most people love it. So in Nigeria, we enjoyed the art of violence from the dramatic perspective. All right, when two people are going back and forth and they're hitting themselves with words like a rap battle, we enjoy it. But every other episode was very sweet, very romantic. So everybody's like, nah, we want the violence, we want the violence. So when they listen to the episode and they heard me do all the back and forth with the lady, they're like, yes, this is what we want. This is what we want.
The
Yeah, we
drama.
want the drama. It was a very dramatic episode.
Okay.
There,
That's
there,
funny.
there, there's other episodes that the fans have really loved. And for every 10 episodes I drop, I have this thing I call TGIF. It's Thank God It's Friday, where we just celebrate what has happened so far in the last 10 episodes. This is the episode where the fans really get to connect with me because I get to read their emails. I get to answer most of their questions. I get to share the plan with them. I also get to do some giveaway items as well. So everybody's always looking out for
Nice.
TGIF. When is the next TGIF happening?
Yeah, man, that's cool. When you were talking about your experience with kind of going back and forth, we call that here in the States, we call it the dozens, where we just eat each other up back and forth. So, yeah, it's always funny and interesting to learn the commonalities that we have experienced. And it's obviously traditional. We've been doing this stuff for ages,
Wow.
right? Going back and forth and
Yeah.
talking shit. I love that.
In Nigeria, we yab each other.
Okay.
I give you my words, you give me your words, and then we keep going. So it's called yabbing
Yeah.
in Nigeria.
Got you. Thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that. I think it's so cool too, your TGIF and that opportunity for your fans and you to really get down to it and connect. Is that something that you had a vision for when you first started the podcast, or is it something that organically grew into something that you wanted to do?
To be honest, I never had that in mind. What had happened was I drop an episode every Friday. I love to read the comments. And someone had said, oh, I think It would be awesome if we had a special episode where all these emails we always send to you, we can hear them, you can read them to us. And I was like, okay, if I always drop episodes on Friday, why don't I just make one special episode called Thank God It's Friday? That's a thing in Nigeria. We always do TGIF, TGIF. So again, it's always
Mhm.
about what they want. I'm telling stories, but I'm more concerned about what the checkmates want. When they say something that I feel, oh, this makes a lot of sense, it's something I should try. There's a particular friend of mine I keep talking about on the episode, the Noel. Every episode, I always say, "Oh, so I went to tell my friend Noel. I want to tell my friend Noel," and they've been saying it in the comments. When are you going to bring Noel to the studio? When are you going to interview Noel? I want to hear from Noel. I want to hear from Noel. So it means at one point I have to listen to them. I have to give them what they want. It might take some time, but I also always have to listen to my people because the podcast is for myself and also for them. You know, so
Absolutely.
I just loved the idea, and I was like, you know what? Every 10 episodes, we just do TJIF.
It's so important to listen to the listeners because they're choosing you. Decided that I want to put you in my eardrums
Mhm.
and listen to what you have going on. It is that mutual benefit, right? You get to grow, they get to experience it. It really is the most important part of what we're doing. Without our listeners, there is no podcast, right? If you don't have them, you might as well go ahead and hang it up. I really appreciate you sharing that you listened to the feedback and you incorporated it into the podcast and your insight on it might not happen right away. It's my process as well. You're the creator and you want to do it the way in which it feels good for you too.
So sometimes I'm not always consistent every Friday. And then for every Friday I miss, you can imagine the amount of emails. And then people are saying, "Oh, Edgar, what's up? We haven't seen your podcast. Are you married already? What's going on?" So again,
Yeah.
I have to always come back sometimes to say, "Oh, sorry, I didn't drop last week Friday. This was what happened." And they feel like they're connected because they feel like when they speak, I listen to them. And then that's beautiful. It's beautiful for me.
And that's so important. As a voiceover artist and content creator, how has podcasting allowed you to explore new dimensions of storytelling?
Just like I mentioned, when I started content creation, from 2015, 2016, there were always comments with people saying, "Oh, bro, I think you should go into radio. Bro, I think you should start a podcast. Bro, we want to hear your voice way more." Most of my contents are driven by my voice. I also get to do a couple of different voices as well. In my country, I can always change my voice. Make it a little bit tiny, so sometimes I speak like this. But the beauty for me is I get to explore different voices, different ranges. I also studied creative arts drama in school at the university. So it helps me that when I'm telling my story, I understand how to use my voice to, infuse or express my comedy, or I also know how to use my voice to make it more dramatic. And that's the beauty. I'm always learning. I have a couple of other
Mhm.
podcasts I'm also listening to say, okay, I like how they did it here. And I want to try that in my podcast as well. So for voiceovers, it's always very interesting because the voice is the base of the podcast. I don't do video podcasts right now. Probably maybe by July, I'll start doing videos. But right now, it's just audio. The voice has to tell the story. The voice has to drive the emotion. The voice has to keep them going. And they need to keep enjoying your voice. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's the way
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah, man. As soon as I put my headphones on and you started to speak, I was like, wow, you have a remarkable voice.
Thank you.
That's what's up. And here, when people have voices sound like yours, they'll say, he could read the phone book and I will listen to it. It doesn't matter what you do. I'll
I have
listen.
this.
Yeah,
I
you can
was
recite the ABCs.
absolutely. I attended the conference one time, and I was trying to explain to the people there at the conference how amazing a deep voice works or baritone works. And I said to them, you can say nonsense in a room, and people still feel, oh, that was deep. Yeah. Let me give you a good example. So if I say something like,
Please.
so let me say this. Let's listen to me for now. In life, we rise by lifting others with rise. And that's why people move even when they know that nothing moves. I think I understand better that better is how I should think. I know what I know because I know you know that I know. And then you have people in the room like, deep. That was some work. Like, not deep.
Standing ovation.
I just said
Oh man,
trash.
that's
I just said
hilarious.
trash. But if my voice was tiny and I said the same thing like,
Absolutely.
you arrived in it, like, shut up, get away.
Yeah. No, that's cool, man. Now, is this an inherited voice?
No, not at all. I think it was a clear case of fake it till you make it.
Okay.
I was in secondary school, college, and a friend of mine told me something. I was really skinny. I had a very basic voice. I'm still skinny, you know what I'm saying? But he told me one thing. He said, if you want to get the girls, there are four things you have to do, Edgar. It's either you have money, you're handsome, you have the body, or you have an amazing voice. So I looked at those four options and I was like, okay, let's see. Money, not really. Not really. That's a hard one. Body, I went to the gym to work out. Bro, it didn't work out. So I took that out.
Got it.
And then the third one was, I think he said, if you're very brilliant. And to be honest, I'm not terrible, but boy, my head couldn't just take those books in. I don't know why, but it wasn't just working for me. So I looked at those four options, and having a deep voice was the closest. Was the closest for me. So at the time, I would just force myself to speak like this. And I would watch programs, watch movies that have guys with deep voice or baritone that I love, and I would just imitate them. And when I started, people would always laugh and say, "Why are you making your voice sound like that?" I'm like, don't worry, very soon, don't worry. Give me some time, give me time, just give me time." And I kept doing that for a
Got you.
while, and it just happened. You know how sometimes you travel to another country and then suddenly your accent just switches? Exactly. So that way,
Yeah.
I just trained myself. Then from then I went to a proper voiceover school train, and then it just happened to me that way. My parents don't sound like this. My dad's voice is not anywhere deep. This has nothing to do with genetics. Nothing. You know,
Got
it's
it.
just trained.
It's trained
Yeah, it's
voice.
just.
Yeah, that's very good to know because that means I still have a chance.
No, but you're rich. You're rich, so you're fine. You're rich. You're
Yeah, I'm rich in love and support.
fine.
So you've shared that podcasting has transformed your life in unexpected ways. What has been the most rewarding lesson you've learned through this journey?
I think the most rewarding thing is the fact that you can cook up an idea and put it out there, and people just come to love that idea. I think that's the greatest reward you can ever get. That you have something in your head and you feel like, oh, if I do it this way, if I say it this way, if I put it with this sound, if I tell this story, there is a chance that thousands of people would love it. For me, is the biggest reward. Whenever I receive an email from a checkmate and person says, "Oh, bro, you are the reason why I started listening to podcasts," or "You are the reason why I have to go home every Friday to get my laptop or to get my phone to listen to something," and someone says, "Oh, I have never spent 45 minutes or 30 minutes listening to audio before your podcast," it's the biggest reward I can ever think of. It's really not about the money I make, or it's just the impact that people can say, hey, Edgar, you didn't drop anything last week. What is going on? You have to drop this week. We need your
Mhm.
podcast. To me, it's the biggest reward ever to have an idea. And because again, like I said, in my country, most people do not take that risk. You don't hear people just telling stories like that. They rather go for allow me, I don't want to call it the easiest way, or they go for the option of interviewing people and just having conversation. That's what they want to do because it's easy to do that. And then they go about getting the biggest of names and the biggest celebrities because they know people will be interested in those stories. But to take that risk to say, you know what, I'm not going to be talking about interviewing just celebrities. I'm going to be sharing my own story. And people are interested in your story. It's the biggest reward you can ever get as a content creator.
Yeah, it definitely affirms the creativity and the fact that this idea came to you. It's something that is yours
Yeah.
and it's yours to realize and to create. And as you said, that risk taking and daring and audacious aspect of people, it's been socialized out of us. And
Mhm.
so when you do take that risk and say, I know I got something, and if I don't do it, then who will? So I can imagine people who are listening to you, you'll start seeing more storytellers and you'll start seeing them because of you.
Yes, a couple of, I think
Yeah.
it was sometime last week, a lady reached out to me to say, "Oh, Edgar, I'm really enjoying your podcast. I want to create a podcast about her family. She's married and she wants to tell a story about her and the husband the same way I'm doing it. She was like, oh, Edgar, can I get a master class on how to put this together? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Why not? We can do something about that. So I will be so excited if we have other creative people telling stories as well. It would mean something to me. It would mean, oh, yes, it is possible. Presently, I'm writing my second podcast. One
Okay.
podcast, it will be sometime released in August this year. It's called Disclosure. It's a story about a popular pastor in Nigeria who raped a young lady, and
Mm,
apparently her parents are just trying to get justice. So it's that kind of podcast. And this is something no one has really done in Nigeria.
mm,
The production of the podcast, it's totally different. And again, the idea is not just to tell these stories because I want to tell a story. It's also to push the minds of creatives in Nigeria to say we can do more than we are already doing. We can be more creative. I think one of the biggest problems we have as creatives is we don't have enough time to think.
you're right.
We're so lost in the action and doing stuff that we don't have enough time to just sit back and say, what can I do? What can I create? We don't have time to think. It's a way of telling other creatives there is time if you make time. You can create something beautiful
Yeah.
if you're deliberate about creating something beautiful. So that's the idea with whatever I do. I have a website, checkedgar.com. On my website, you would see that I have stories where I write, I have videos there, I have podcasts there, I have courses there. The idea for me is when anyone visit my website, before you actually even take an action, I want you to feel like this is something I can also do. This is something I can try myself. That's where I'm going with my arts, basically.
Yeah, Edgar, I respect that so much. You're speaking so much truth. It's something that plagues creatives
Yeah.
across the globe, across the diaspora. We start focusing on the noise, which is the models, the status quo. This is how it's done. This is how it's done.
Yeah.
Stay in this box. But we will stay in status quo if we continue status quo stuff, right? You've got to disrupt that. You've got to break that.
True.
And so I really respect you showing up and being that possibility in your own storytelling. The organic aspect of it for me, just listening to you right now, two of the biggest trends, and one has been a trend for quite some time in podcasting, but true crime. And then what's recently come up in the last year has been the opportunity for limited series and really just taking a story, using it, and moving on, but it stays there forever. It doesn't go anywhere.
Mhm.
It becomes an archive of that experience of what occurred and for that time. And you are just really moving this forward naturally. And I really respect that about you, man.
Thank you, man. Grateful, grateful, grateful.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I have another interview that I've done for this season, and it's with Sambaza Podcast. And he is from Kenya. And he was saying to me in that episode that he understands what's going on in Kenya, but he wants to learn more about Nigerian podcasters. So I can't wait to connect you two. But how do you feel about podcasting and how it is shifting and growing, specifically in Lagos, where you are?
To be honest, podcast is growing gradually in my country. Every single day, you have one new creative who is starting a podcast. There's always this same with podcasts. You have to wait till the episode to be sure the person is serious about podcasts because so many times you have people start a podcast, first, second, third episode, and then they're tired. What we're doing is, of course, a couple of great content creators. I said what I said, beautiful podcast in Nigeria. Many Zims and other beautiful podcasts. It's really growing there. They're having great audience, 20,000 followers, 50,000, 100,000 followers as well. I think for me, the more we explore different types of podcasts, or the beauty becomes. Because right now, what we have is, like I said, interviews. And when I listen more to podcasts on BBC, Gimlet Media, I like the level at which you guys, when I mean you guys, people in the US and the UK, how you guys are taking
Mhm.
podcasts. So we're growing, we're getting there. It's really not easy because sometimes monetization hasn't really come in Nigeria as well. So people are not really doing stuff with their hearts. Again, most people are doing it because, oh, let me see if I can make money from here. And when they try, they don't get money. They move to probably just doing videos on
Mhm.
YouTube and trying to make money from blogging or other things. So it's growing gradually. But I can tell in the next 5, 10 years, it would be big because, again, you have young creatives and that I've also listened to that are creating amazing podcasts as well. And these
Hmm.
things just, it takes time, but you can tell that the quality of the production, the style of storytelling, the art itself is beautiful. And we just need more people doing that, basically. I also
Yeah.
believe that we need more people telling Nigerian stories on our podcast, because most people tell entertainment news. It's always about the entertainment, what's happening in the world of entertainment. That's what everybody wants to discuss, the trend of the time. But we really have few people talking about Nigeria as a country and what is really happening in Nigeria. From the politics to the economy, most people shy away from that. We have more religious podcasts in Nigeria than podcasts about the country itself. And right now, if you ask me, oh Edgar, what is that podcast that I should listen to if I want to know more about your country? I don't know the podcast to listen to if you want to know more about Nigeria. I don't know the kind of podcast.
Got
There's
you.
so many issues in the country that people focus more on the issues of the country than the beauty of the country. So for someone like the guy you mentioned from Kenya who wants to listen or know more about Nigeria, I don't know the podcast to say, oh, go and listen to this. You can always understand more about the country. But if he wants to understand the societal ills and the problems of the country, I can mention so many podcasts that will tell you problems of Nigeria. But that's really not good for the country. So I think that people should do
Hmm.
more and tell more stories about Nigeria and the beauty of the country as well, because Nigeria is a beautiful country.
I think it's important that you point that out because hopefully someone will listen,
Yes.
just like you listen to your listeners. But I think also what you do is so important because everything is about the person too, the individual, the collective.
Mhm.
And so even you sharing dating stories shares information
Mhm.
in a way. And the interviews with the different celebrities that live in that area, it still provides information that we otherwise wouldn't have.
Yeah.
I think to your point, having that context and really understanding what's going on is so important. So I do hope someone will heed the call
Hopefully.
that you're putting out here right now.
Hopefully. Hopefully.
Yeah, yeah.
Hopefully.
And it may be you in a limited series at some point. But first things first,
Yeah.
and
Who knows?
what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Edgar, this has been such a great conversation, man. I've been so happy to talk to you.
Thank you, man.
It's been exciting to get to know
It
you.
is. It's been exciting, to be honest. I just started in August when I had the opportunity to jump on this. I told myself I wouldn't miss this for anything. Platforms like yours are important for content creators and creatives like myself who are really just trying to grow, and
Hmm.
especially when we're trying to expand our reach as well. I'm so grateful. I am sure you had many other options, and then you said, you know what, I'm going to give Edgar a chance, and I appreciate that. Appreciate that. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Sometimes as creators, we're in silos. That's it by itself.
Yeah.
But then also as a podcast industry, I want to know and I want to see that we are doing this work wherever we are
Yeah.
because we are the greatest storytellers
Mhm.
and we do have the heart for this. And so just to see you in the space and again, being such a possibility for other people who want to do this work as well. I couldn't be happier that you chose podcasting and that you're sharing your voice and literally with the masses. I appreciate you, man.
Thank you. I just hope that my voice have been heard.
It has. It has. Now, before I let you go, I want to make sure two things. If there are any future goals, and you did share the next podcast that you're doing, but if there's anything else that you want us to know about, let us know that. But also how to find you online and any social media accounts, but also how we can support. What can folks do as we listen to really rally around you and support you and keep going?
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, first of all, I have a website that I recently launched, checkedgar.com website, checkedgar.com. Funny enough, I think I should also say this. I never had the plan to brand myself as Check Edgar. The idea has always just been Edgar Ariaka. That's my real and full name, Edgar Ariaka. And
Hmm.
when I wanted to get my website done, this was a long time ago when I got my domain. I told my friend of mine, I said, help me check edgar.com if it is available. And then he came back 2 days after and said, yes, check edgar.com is available. And I was like, what? I said edgar.com, help me check edgar.com. And then we kept quiet for 5 seconds and looked at each other. I was like,
Right.
Check Edgar's not bad though. So that was how we started Check Edgar as a brand. But
Nice.
I have a portfolio website, but more for the people. I love to write comedy more than I act. So I have blogs. I also have different types of blogs. I have stories about Nigeria, relationship blogs, satire, comedy. Different episodes are dropping every week. I also have podcasts. Why Am I Still Single? Disclosure is coming very soon. I have videos, social media pranks, social media, a couple of contents as well that'll be coming as well. So what I would really love is for people to just check my website. That's all. Checkedgar.com daily. I also have a show coming up sometime later in the year. So it's Stand With Me. It's coming out sometime in September. For those of you that are listening in Nigeria, if you love stand-up comedy, you want to have a great time, I think you should check out Stand With Me, coming out in September. I'll be traveling to the UK in February next month for I also do children theater as well. So I have a tour in the UK. Yeah, about 6 cities, 30 different performances. There's a piece called Sandscape, a different type of theater where we play with sand in front of children and do amazing things with sand. I think people would love that as well. So yeah, but if you're really just trying to find me, you're trying to connect, you can search on Instagram, Check Edgar, or you can use my handle at edgar.ariaka. I know Ariaka is a big word. You're trying to spell that. My Edgar is Edgar dot Eriakha. However, if you're just trying to find it, just search Check Edgar. You would find me there. Anywhere. Make sure that you check edgar.com daily.
Yeah.
What we talking about?
It sounds like you're having fun, and I love that for you.
Yes, I am having fun. To be honest, I only have one life to live. And this is what I enjoy doing. I have a studio, I have a mic. Sometimes I just try stuff. I love to experiment. I love making people happy. And if you know me, you know that whenever I am there, I am the life of that room because I want people to be happier as well. This excitement, this joy can't just be in me. I love to express my joy in
Mhm.
whatever I am doing, whether it's in my writing, in my voicing, in my acting, all human senses. So your sight, your hearing, everything. I got you. I got you.
Nice. And we get to experience you on YouTube as well. I did check out that you have a YouTube channel. So I'm looking forward to getting into it, man. And I'm really exploring more of your creativity because it is when you find somebody who is deliberate and determined to be creative on their own terms,
Mm,
those are people you want to hear from and listen to.
absolutely.
So I can't wait personally to jump in. So thanks again, Edgar, for your time.
Thank you for having
And
me.
we're connected now. So I'm looking forward to staying connected and seeing what else we can create together.
Absolutely. I cannot wait to just stay connected.
I'm here for it. So thank you
Thank
again.
you. Thank you